afraid of persons affected with dementia, whether they attack or something like that. They are in such a situation.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of, well, even a lack of information about, what are the behaviors and why. Usually, people's behavior has meaning. There's a reason, but if you're not, kind of have information about why and how to respond in ways that are helpful, it's really hard for family. How do you know what to do? Yeah, for sure.
So do you have any facilities in Kerala to look after persons with dementia? Are you aware of any?
No, ma'am, I'm not much aware about those things. I had visited Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences at Kollam, and there I had seen one geriatric department, and especially there was one dementia care area.
Okay.
But in other hospitals, in the majority of hospitals, I don't see any geriatric or they are giving any special care for dementia patients. I don't know.
Outside of the hospital also, right? So there may be places in the community which have care for persons with dementia?
No, I have no idea, ma'am.
Yeah, they are very few and far between for sure.
Yeah. And because the family is also really confused when they are with all these changes in their behavior.
Totally. Yeah. Maybe the home science department should start something, huh?
Yeah. That's a good suggestion, ma'am. We'll
to train young people to work with persons with dementia, right? It may be a good idea.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The students that we had, they both had family members. They were international students from India, and they both had family members who had dementia. And while they were doing the project, we're quite surprised by, oh, yeah, okay, now that makes more sense, and we're able to share that with their families. So even having one person in the family have some insight and more context and education around it really can help the whole family and community, right? So, yeah.
Completely, yeah. So if your students are trained in understanding dementia and signs of dementia and how you can perhaps help people with dementia, it'll be so good for their own families and for society, right? Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening. I have to keep remembering it's evening. I'm looking out and it's bright out.
And good morning to you, ma'am. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah.
So please let us know whenever you'd like us to start.
Yeah, ma'am, there is a small procedure. We are waiting for some more participants. So we will have a welcome speech. Then one of the coordinator will be introducing the speakers. That is ma'am and both of you. Then you can start, ma'am.
Okay, that sounds very formal, but thank you. Yes.
Yeah, one thing that I wonder about while we're waiting is, and I don't know if people feel comfortable either showing their face or whatever, or speaking, is just having a sense of how many people know of anyone who has dementia or Alzheimer's. That would be, that might help us. Or if there's particular questions people have even before we start. It might come up while we talk. But
Groenenberg.
Yes.
I'm a physician. I'm joining from USA.
Okay, welcome.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay for more than, say, 20 minutes because I am giving a talk on it. Plus, half an hour from now.
Okay.
I have the opportunity to take care of at least the past, say, 30 years, more than 50 patients with the dementia. So,
yeah. So you have a lot of experience. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. What have you found most helpful?
The first and foremost thing, when they don't have dementia, they unnecessarily believe that they have dementia.
Yeah.
And
so not recognizing that they have the disease. Yeah.
But they don't have. They don't have that one.
Oh, no.
Because of the fear. And if many people, when they come to me saying that, okay, they want the test to be done to rule out the dementia. When I administer simple tests, I find that they don't have dementia. Then I tell them, don't worry. Don't go for all these time-consuming, expensive tests. And if you go to a psychologist, they may think that they may say that you have dementia. Because at the age of 70, when you administer certain tests, they're so complicated. They won't be able to. Then they say, yeah, cognitive impairment, something like that. This guy gets a label that he has got dementia.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're right. Once the label is on you, that can actually have an impact in terms of not, you know, feeling good about yourself or almost giving up. But if it's an accurate, you know, diagnosis and the tests are, you know, then that might be helpful in terms of treatment plan, right?
Yes. And especially in USA, in some states, if a person is diagnosed to be has dementia, it must be immediately reported to the Department of Motor Vehicles. Then the driving license will be revoked. That is a real, when they don't have real dementia, now in this country, without a driving license, you are completely, your life will be hell. So that's what is happening.
Yeah. And so then they become a lot more isolated.
Yes.
And yeah, their, you know, their engagement with other people decreases, and then that impacts their cognition, right? So it's like a vicious cycle.
And the depression, frustration, they become dependent on others. They have, from independence, they become dependent.
Yeah. Yeah, doctor, that's a really, really good point. So what has been happening, like in terms of working with, you know, assessors and psychologists who are doing the testing around dementia?
And that is, to be frank, I think that is referring to a neuropsychologist. If you think that the patient doesn't have dementia, that is the biggest mistake. As a physician should be able to screen some questions. And if you think that there's no dementia, never, never send a patient to a neuropsychologist.
Oh, okay.
That is the take-home message. I don't do that one.
Yeah, yeah. And you're right that the tests are not that complicated, and physicians should be able to do that no problem. In our program, we actually have full courses on assessment, and our students are able to test. They're not neuropsychologists or, you know, physicians, they're social service workers, but the testing, you know, yeah. And the label, you're right, that can be quite, I mean, it's important to know so that, you know, there are treatments that you can kind of keep someone on a plateau with where their functioning is. But yeah, just running right away to the motor vehicle board and getting rid of their license is not a solution. No.
Right.
Thank you for that input. That's amazing. Thank you.
So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, which is about to begin. We request the participants to mute their audio during the webinar. We will be running a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. If you have any queries, just post them in the chat box, or you may ask the resource persons directly. Now, let me welcome Dr. Ashwati Subnan, Head of the Department of Home Science, Sri Narayana College for Women, Kollam, to welcome the gathering. Over to you, Ashwati ma'am.
Ashwati miss, you are muted. Please unmute.
Sorry. Respected Manager of Sri Narayana Colleges, Sri Vellapalli Nadeshan sir, Treasurer, Sri Narayana Trust, Dr. G. Jayadevan, our Principal, Dr. R. Sunil Kumar sir, Dr. Sheridan sir, IQAC Coordinator, our resource persons of the day, Dr. Farzana Chaze ma'am and Dr. Nellie Groenenberg ma'am, Dr. Aparna Das, Coordinator of International Webinar Series, faculty members of Sri Narayana College for Women, Dr. Venugopal Reddy, sir, who is from USA. He's the resource person for our zoology webinar will be happening tomorrow. And a very warm good evening to all of you. And we are very delighted to have this particular webinar on caring for persons with dementia. It's a part of our webinar series, ECLECTICS 2020, organized by our college and Internal Quality Assurance Cell. And in today's webinar, we addresses a significant area that is about caring for persons with dementia. Actually, dementia is a syndrome usually of a chronic and progressive nature that leads to deterioration in cognitive functions. And dementia results from a variety of diseases and injuries that primarily or secondarily affect the brain, such as Alzheimer's disease or stroke. And dementia is currently the 7th leading causes of death among all diseases and one of the major causes of disability and dependency among older people worldwide. Worldwide, around 55 million people have dementia, with over 60% living in low and middle income countries. As the proportion of older people in the population is increasing in nearly every country, this number is expected to rise to 70 million in 2030 and 139 million in 2050. World Health Organization recognizes dementia as a public health priority, and in May 2017, the World Health Assembly endorsed the Global Action Plan on the Public Health Responses to Dementia 2017-2025. The plan provides a comprehensive blueprint for action for policymakers, international, regional, and national partners, and WHO as in the following areas: addressing dementia as a public health priority, increasing awareness of dementia and creating a dementia-inclusive society, reducing the risk of dementia, diagnosis, treatment, and care, information systems for dementia, support for dementia carers, and research and innovation. Let me now move on with my duty of welcoming the dignitaries. Now, I welcome Sree Nadation, manager, Sree Narayana Colleges. Actually, he is the patron for this particular webinar. On behalf of Sree Narayana College for Women, Department of Home Science, and on my personal behalf, I extend a very respectful welcome to you, sir. Dr. G. Jayadevan, Treasurer, Sree Narayana Trust, has been very supportive and encouraging for all the activities in our college. And on behalf of our college and department, I extend a warm welcome to you, sir. I extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Venugopal Reddy for this particular webinar. We are glad that he is attending mostly all of our webinars. I would now welcome our principal, Dr. R. Sunil Kumar, sir, who has been very supportive for all the activities of our department. On behalf of our department, I extend a warm welcome to you, sir. I would like to welcome Dr. Sheridan, IPC coordinator of our college, who has been a constant support to all our activities. On behalf of our department, I extend a warm welcome to you, sir. I also welcome the energetic coordinator of the International Webinar Series, Dr. Aparna Das, Assistant Professor of PG Department of Economics. Our speakers of the day, Dr. Farzana Chaze and Dr. Nellie Groenenberg, joins us from Ontario, Canada. Both are faculties of Applied Health and Community Studies, Sheridan College, Ontario, Canada. It is a pleasure to have such a noted personality to address us this evening. On behalf of the Department of Home Science, Sree Narayana College for Women, and all present here, I extend a very cordial welcome to Dr. Farzana Madam and Dr. Nellie Groenenberg Ma'am. And we are delighted to have a lot of faculties and researchers across various disciplines join us on this zone to participate in this webinar. An extra special word of welcome goes to each one of them who have taken the time out to be here this evening. I welcome all the participants who are virtually here with us and hope that the valuable messages you take from this webinar would be effective. Once again, here a hearty welcome, wishing you all a great time ahead. Thank you. And now I would like to call upon Ms. Indu Suresh, Assistant Professor, Department of Home Science and Coordinator of the webinar, to introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ashwati Subhanan. Good evening, one and all. Welcome to today's webinar, Caring for Persons with Dementia. Today is all about uncovering dementia. I would like to welcome and introduce our speakers, Dr. Farzana Chaze and Dr. Nellie Groenenberg. We are so glad to have you here today to share your insights on caring for persons with dementia. Our first speaker Dr. Farzana Chaze is a professor at the School of Applied Health and Community Studies, Sheridan College, Ontario, Canada, where she teaches courses related to diversity, immigration, and research. She completed her Doctor of Philosophy in Social Work from York University. She also holds a Master of Social Work degree from the University of Toronto and from the University of Mumbai. She has over 25 years of experience in the field of social work research, education, and practice. Dr. Farzana Chaze serves as an external reviewer for many Canadian and international academic publications and granting bodies. Her research interests include immigrant settlement and integration, older adults, diversity and social inclusion, qualitative and quantitative research methods, social work practice, and knowledge mobilization. Let me introduce our next speaker, Dr. Nellie Groenenberg. Dr. Groenenberg is the professor at the School of Applied Health and Community Studies, Sheridan College, Ontario, Canada, where she is the coordinator with the Social Service Worker Gerontology Program. Dr. Groenenberg has over 25 years of frontline experience with older adults and families. She teaches clinical courses about working with individuals and their families. Her research interests have focused on the use of expressive arts with persons living with dementia. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Farzana Chaze and Dr. Nellie Groenenberg. And now, without further ado, let me invite our resource persons, Dr. Farzana Chaze and Dr. Nellie Groenenberg, to enlighten our audience with your pearls of wisdom. Over to you, madam. The platform is all yours.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, and thank you everyone for having us. Dr. Aswita, thank you for having Nellie and me here. I will share our slideshow and maybe not my entire screen. How do I do that? So, do I share a window? No. Sorry, I've never used Google Slides before. So how do I share my screen? I have a PowerPoint presentation. I click the up arrow and then, okay, let's try this.
Ma'am, there is an arrow inside a box.
Yeah, I'm seeing that, but then, and then, let's try this.
Ma'am, you can share the window, ma'am. You can share the window and you can click on that particular tab where your screen is shown.
Thank you so much. That was not very good. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. And sorry about that. We use Zoom and WebEx much more than Google Meet, so not comfortable with this. All right. So thank you everyone for having us again. Our topic for today is caring for persons with dementia. What we hope to cover today is my colleague Nellie will start us off with talking about what cognitive impairment is all about. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, okay. We can hear you, Farzana.
Yeah, because I can't see the screen either now that I'm sharing. Thank you. Right. The 8 A's of dementia, and we'll talk then about caring for persons with dementia and some of the challenges that arise in caring for persons with dementia, and also best practice communication strategies for all families, and about a toolkit that Nellie and I were involved in creating together for creating awareness on how to care for people with dementia. This was Hindi and Punjabi language resources that we created, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. So to start us off, Nellie is going to talk to us about what cognitive impairment is and about dementia. Over to you, Nellie.
Thanks, Farzana, and thanks so much for having us. I wonder if it's possible, if I know I'll do a lot of presenting and speaking, but I also wonder if I might be able to hear from some people around, if they've had experience with people with dementia, either in their families or community. Do you think that would be possible for folks to speak up if they're able to, or? I can also just talk I'll talk for a bit, and then we'll do a little, when we do the Q&A, we'll hear more about your own experience. So cognitive impairment, you know, it affects your cognition in terms of being able to concentrate and focus, you know, being able to formulate ideas, reason things out, and your judgment and evaluation is affected. It's interesting in our program when we start, we run a social service worker gerontology program. It's a 2-year diploma. And often when we start talking about dementia and the signs of dementia, half the students think that they have it. Because, you know, some of these things, when you talk about difficulty concentrating, it's like, yeah, when you're under stress or, you know, when you're having, you know, a lot of multiple demands, you know, some of these things can come up. But this is not your regular everyday forgetting where your keys or your phone is. This is, you know, certainly more than that. And we'll discuss that further. Next slide, Farzana.
Sure.
Thank you. So age-associated memory impairment. So that's a term that we use to describe, you know, mild cognitive impairment. And I think the important first part is that it's age-related. So we'll talk about this further later, but one of the things that we know is that the older you are, your risk for having cognitive impairment and memory issues increases. There's a lot of protective factors, of which all of you are taking part in right now. Education is a really important piece in terms of, it doesn't take away all the risk, but it certainly helps with, you know, so lifelong learning. So continue to take these webinars even as you're in your 80s. And it certainly helps with, you know, keeping yourself, you know, as sharp as possible. So it is a gradual decline. So sometimes when you hear people, there's different types of dementia. Some of them are fast, but very few. Most of them, it's a gradual progression over many years. As the doctor spoke about before, you know, it's about the brain aging and the changes that happen. There may be that folks who have age-associated memory impairment, that they start complaining about feeling like they're forgetting a lot of things. It may take them longer to process both information coming in and being able to speak about things and recall things and voice their experience and ideas. So it's both the processing coming in and going out. And I think an important piece is that it's not all older adults that get age-associated memory impairment or dementia. It's not a normal, quote, normal part of aging. But as I said, it does increase, the propensity increases with age. Next slide, Farzana. Thank you. So first, we'll talk about mild cognitive impairment. And as I said, it's not a normal part of aging, but it certainly happens as folks age. It's a clinical condition, you know, between, you know, at this point, they would not be necessarily diagnosed as having dementia, but they're, you know, they're at the very early stages. They can still do all their activities of daily living, you know, they're shopping, making phone calls, seeing friends, you know, getting themselves dressed and ready for the day, driving, all those things. So what we do know is that if people have a mild cognitive impairment, they're 5 to 10 times more likely to, you know, have more advanced types of dementia. So again, someone could have a mild cognitive impairment and not progress into further dementias, but they certainly have a higher likelihood. Next slide. So as was said before, dementia is a neurological syndrome. It's why that nice blue umbrella is there, is it's an umbrella term. So it really speaks to dementia as a broad way of talking about cognition that is severely enough impacted that affects their social and occupational functioning. So again, this is not the forgetting your keys or blanking out on an exam. This is a lot more that it affects your daily life. And usually it's not just that individual who notices. It may be family members, you know, partners and so on. So the most common type of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. Most of you probably have heard of Alzheimer's, but that's not the only type. There's quite a few others. There's vascular dementia, so that's when there's like a bleed, like a stroke, and so that can impact people's cognition and ability to function. And when I go through the 8 A's, I'm sure that there's a number of things that you're going to listen to and go, oh, that was what affected, you know, my uncle, my aunt, who had a stroke. So you'll see that. Now, Lewy body and frontal temporal lobe dementia, those are more fast, or the progression happens more quickly. So with Alzheimer's, it can be a 10-year slow decline, whereas with frontal temporal lobe or Lewy body, those are often when you hear about folks who get dementia at a younger age. And those may be, the progression is quite a bit faster. Next slide. Yeah, so as I said before, when you look at this graph, you see that, you know, in terms of cognitive impairment in that younger age, I mean, we think 65 to 74 is young. Many of you are like, yeah, no, that's old. But for us, that's young. And it's not very high, as you can see. It's really quite low. But as people get into 75 to 84, it becomes higher, but after 85, that's where it really kind of skyrockets, right? So if you're fortunate enough to live to be much older, your risks increase. Again, it's not, you know, a death sentence, or that, you know, for sure you're going to get it if you're in your 90s. It's just that your risks for it are higher. Next slide. Okay, so I think we went over this. So 60 to 70% of cases are the type of dementia is the Alzheimer's type. So we're going to briefly talk about some of the stages of Alzheimer's, and we're also going to talk about the 8 A's, which they help you to kind of get a sense of whether or not, you know, these are some of the signs that you might see with someone who has dementia. Okay, with that. Okay, so the early stage of Alzheimer's are really, you know, mild kinds of symptoms. So you're going to see people who are forgetting that they have doctor's appointments. Again, you know, my students are like, I forget that I have a doctor's appointment. Doesn't mean you have dementia, but you know, certainly having more difficulty communicating, you know, mood swings. And one of the things that we have to be mindful of is that, you know, you may see some of these symptoms, but it could be other things. It could be depression. It could be that, you know, someone is grieving and they're overwhelmed through the grief process. So it's kind of like when people take their first psychology course. It's like, oh, I know with the DSM, all these different people, these are their diagnoses. So we don't want to get into that. But it's just, you know, I think this particular talk is just giving like really a high overview, you know, just to maybe, you know, ask more questions and look further. Okay, next slide. So middle stage of Alzheimer's disease is that you're going to see more memory loss, cognition abilities deteriorate at this stage. And people may still be aware of the fact that that they're having these memory and physical functioning changes. And that can be really challenging for the individual, both at early stage and at middle stage, because it's like you have a lot of ability to reflect on what's happening, and it's scary, right? Nobody wants to have you know, cognitive changes or you know, increases in their disabilities, and see that there may be things that they can't do anymore. And we certainly see that with any kind of physical disabilities and changes over time and aging. But this, you know, I think it's important for us to know that having Alzheimer's or other types of dementia isn't, you know, the worst thing that can happen. Sometimes people's personalities, I've seen this, where they become softer as opposed to more challenging. I think there's some folks who might be off mute that are making funny sounds, but you know, I can work through that.
Nellie, I think that's my dog, but I'm scared to shut this because let me try to mute myself. I'm trying to mute myself.
Angel snores. This is what happens with Farzana's dog. That's okay. If it's just Angel, I can deal with it.
Yeah, it's her. Sorry about that. I don't know how to mute myself now with this.
No problem. No problem. I know it's Angel. Really cute dog, a beagle. So late stage is often referred to as severe or advanced Alzheimer's. And this is where you're going to see a lot of functional loss. People may not be able to, you know, get themselves dressed. When we talk about the 8 A's, we'll talk more specifically about what some of those challenges look like. But it may even involve that they're unable to communicate. And one of the things verbally, it still doesn't mean that people can't communicate, but it really is a challenge for carers, family members, friends, to continue to engage with that person, because it's not easy, right? They may want to communicate with you. They may try to, and sometimes it comes out in behaviors, right? Where people, you know, might be upset, but they can't communicate it. Well, that, you know, I can take this and throw it across the room, and you'll get that I'm upset, and you know, maybe that I want that to stop. So yeah, so it becomes, you know, increasingly more challenging. Yeah. Okay, next slide. So end of life, you know, people at their final, you know, stage of dementia, you know, they will need care, you know, around the clock. It may not mean that they have to be, you know, in an institution of some kind or you know, a facility, but it does mean that the family is going to need increased resources to be able to care for that person at home. You know, all their needs will have to be met by others. So dressing, bathing, being changed, eating. So, you know, again, really needing to support families to be able to manage that and not get burnt out and frustrated by the process. It's a, you know, it's a predicted process. So some of the reasons that we want to talk about these different stages is that people, you know what they say, knowledge is power, but it's also, you know, if you have a sense of what to expect, it may not be quite as frightening or upsetting, because it's like, okay, this is the normal progression, and this is where we're at right now. And yeah, okay. So in terms of end of life, you know, with death and dying, it's really about, you know, making sure that person is comfortable. And some of the challenges with that, as some of you may know, is that if there isn't the verbal capacity to be able to say, you know, I'm experiencing pain or discomfort, it's really up to us to read those facial cues and, you know, really assessing for ourselves and with other professionals about what are the best next steps. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I think one of the important pieces when we're looking at dementia and working with families is there's an expression that's used in the field that when you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. So everyone's unique. It can be appealing to just say, okay, this is what everybody experiences, but that really is of little benefit to the person and their lived experience. So, I've worked with Holocaust survivors, for instance, who, and I'll describe that in some of the other slides, but, it's like not all Holocaust survivors have the same experience. Not all people who have experienced, trauma have the same experience. And it's really about all of us, really taking our cues from the family or the client that we're working with, and really tailoring what we do and how we do it based on their lived experience. And it can be really helpful as much as possible knowing and hearing from the individual and also from their family members and people who are close to them, what was their life experience? Who were they close to? What did they enjoy? And that can help us to really, get to know the person. It's interesting. There was a facility that, people were quite upset and frustrated with this individual. They felt like they called it combative. They thought he was just like raging and da-da-da. And then they watched a home video from the family and they realized this is a grandfather who loves his grandchildren, who was a caring father, who was creative and, playful and loved to dance. And then all of a sudden from the people who were doing the care, who saw this as a man who was just aggressive or depressive, now they had a lot more compassion and saw him as a person as opposed to someone or something that's ruining their day. So that's really important to keep the person in our view, so that we're not kind of depersonalizing that person and vilifying them, making them like the enemy. Okay, next slide. So here are the 8 A's. The 8 A's, obviously there's no test on this. You don't have to memorize all of these, but it's just getting you a little familiar with some of the symptoms, some of the realities of folks who are experiencing dementia. So I'll go through each of these individually. Thanks, Farzana. So amnesia, all of you probably know what amnesia is because there's all these films about, oh, you hit your head and you forget everything. But this is, more the clinical perspective. And so it may be, that the person forgets that they had, that they had dinner, or, they may misplace, a book, and it becomes quite upsetting to them, and that they have to ruminate and go over and over and over to try to find this book. One of the things that we know is that we really, when we're working with people with dementia, is rather than saying, you gave that book away, last year, it's like, oh, okay, can I help look for this book with you? And then you start looking for the book, and then you can say, what was that book like for you? What did you like about that book? Why is this book something that's important to you? Or why do you love books? And then having that conversation. And so really the idea is that we're joining them in the journey, as opposed to trying to correct them. I did gerontology, I studied it about 35 years ago in the beginning, at least my beginning. And it used to be back in the day that they taught us as social workers to have a reality orientation in working with people with dementia. So if they say, it's, I don't know, that they've had dinner, or they're not going to eat dinner now because they've already had dinner. We don't get in at that point. We would be like, oh no, Farzana, you haven't had dinner. You know, you need to come to the, you know, because you haven't had dinner. And we go over and over again, like where someone thinks that that their partner hasn't died. We would go, oh, well, you know, Farzana, I'm using Farzana, your partner died 5 years ago. I mean, that's horrible if you think about it. Like, really? We're going to make them go over and over into this difficult situation. So, yeah. So, all right, let's look here. So it also is, you know, people will, you know, feel like they're in the past. Certainly I've had lots of clients, even my brother-in-law, his mother died of dementia a number of years ago. But when he would walk in the room, hard time seeing. Okay, when he would walk in the room, she would mistaken him as her husband, who had died a number of years earlier. But that's her son. And so, you know, genetically, he is, of course, going to, well, not of course, but he does look like his dad. So, you know, she may have mistaken him as her husband, and, you know, maybe not remember people's names, or that that's my daughter as opposed to my sister. So it becomes, you know, an experience that people, they say are living in the past. And depending on what their past was like, that could be a good thing, or it could be a really challenging thing, right? So really getting to know people's life and what that was like can really help us in the care. It also may be forgetting recent events. Okay, thank you. So aphasia, this is the one where people have a difficulty understanding language and also speaking. This is one that you often see with people who have had a stroke. So here in Canada, we have an aphasia center, and it's specifically working with people who have had strokes, and it has affected their ability to speak. So it may also be difficulty finding words. Now, I have difficulty finding words right now. I don't have dementia. So again, it's like, you know, don't, you know, think just because you see some of these things, that means, oh, they have dementia. Yeah, so certainly, I think one of the things that's important to think about is that people need more time processing. So information coming in, information coming out. So when you're working with someone who has dementia and has aphasia, you know, saying you know, things with multiple instructions, or saying it really quickly, like, okay, Farzana, we're going to go outside, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that. That's, you need to say the sentence, give the person time to process it. And then rather than being uncomfortable with the silence, allowing that space for them to process it and then be able to bring it out. So it's really like slowing down the process. We don't want to be like, okay, Farzana, you don't have to speak slowly, but don't, you know, do lots of multiple things over, you know, and not give them time and space. So it's really, in terms of respect, we still want to treat everyone as you would before they had this disease, and like you would treat anyone else with respect. But, you know, kind of keeping that in your mind. Okay. All right, let's go to the next slide. Oh, also they maybe revert back to their first language. So, you know, it could be Hindi or Punjabi, it could be German or French, like it just, you know, wherever they're from. They may have learned the language of the country that they're in right now, but eventually may go back to their language of origin. Yeah, thanks. Hi, Angel. So agnosia. So that's trouble recognizing objects and places. So I've done a lot of art therapy with folks with dementia. And one of the things that, you know, we found is that we had to have one-on-one volunteers with folks who had agnosia, because they may dip their brush into the paint and then go to eat it, or try to brush their teeth with the paintbrush. And so, you know, in terms of safety, you have to be watching folks and being mindful that they may, you know, see, you know, this thing of cream and try to drink it because it looks like a bottle, right? So yes, just, you know, they may, again, not recognize staff, but the misuse of objects is one of the things that is, you know, again, taking a fork and using that to comb your hair, which isn't a bad idea, by the way, if you don't have a comb. But okay, next slide. Okay, so apraxia is trouble with purposeful movement. So you often see this with folks who have Parkinson's. So they may not be able to perform activities of daily living, and they may not get the tasks and the steps of the task correct. So that may be someone who is putting their underwear over top of their pants, for instance, or having difficulty switching from, okay, I'm moving this way to switching to moving that way. Yeah, next slide. So anesthesia, really hard to say, is a lack of awareness, and the doctor was talking about that earlier, the lack of awareness that they have this disease, for instance. So, and have difficulty with thinking about very specific things. So in this slide, we kind of break down what this word root meaning is, and it's, you know, that there's no illness or disease or knowledge of it. So one of the things, so the person's reality is not our reality. And one thing that I've seen be very helpful is with someone who has anesthesia is that they may not want to use the walker, right? They're like, I don't need to use a walker. I walk perfectly fine, or not want to stay in a wheelchair when they actually really cannot use their legs properly to walk. So one of the things that I've done, and I've seen a lot of other carers do that, is like, I know you don't have this, whatever, but can you just do this for me, please? Because if you have a good relationship with that person, they want to please you in that way, right? They want to do something that make you happy, and then, or, you know, my boss is going to get upset with me if I don't have you use the walker today when we go to the activity room. So people will do things because they like you. So having a good relationship certainly helps a lot. Next slide. All right, so refusing assistance, as we said, like with a walker or a cane, you know, insisting that they'd already done that. Like, so if someone comes and says, okay, well, it's time to have a shower or go have a bath, they'll be like, I already did that. I did that, like, you know, I did that an hour ago, or I did that, you know, just a few minutes ago. And really have a lack of insight. The thing is, it's not denial. So sometimes people are like, oh, you know, my father-in-law is driving me crazy. He thinks that he's had a bath and he hasn't, and he's lying about it. Well, it's not. It's just totally not. Their awareness is just different. And again, it's not to make your life more difficult. It's just a part of the disease process. Next slide. So this is a fun one, as in not fun at all for the person, is that, altered perception or trouble perceiving the world accurately. So this can come in many forms. It can come in delusions, like where they think something's happened where it hasn't, or illusions where they're seeing things, or hallucinations, seeing things. Also depth of perception. So in this slide, you see two different scenarios. One is with a bath, and with a mat. And so in the bath, people may not see that there's a bottom, think that they're going into like an ocean kind of space. And I don't swim, so I can't get into that. So you'll see people fighting to not go into that, you know, bath because they're afraid they're going to drown. That black mat you know, we all know it's, you know, it's two-dimensional. They may see that as, or it's three-dimensional, but that it's a black hole, right? That they're going into a big hole. So one thing that they use sometimes in spaces is that they'll put a black mat at the door with someone who is what they call, quote, trying to get out. And that stops the person because they're like, I can't get through that hole, right? I love that. I love that. I don't know if you all hear this, but Farzana's dog's snoring. Hopefully none of you are snoring, but you never know. Okay, next slide. Okay, so apathy, it's a lack of motivation and initiation. So you'll see people who are sitting and not wanting to, you know, they'll sit at the side of their bed and they just aren't going to move. They aren't going to initiate either conversation or eating, and they may seem wrong. And again, we have to be careful. Like, is this the dementia? Is it depression? So really, you know, based on our scope of practice, we have to make sure that we're engaging with those professionals that can figure it out. You know, it may be that a medication or a treatment program might be able to alter this and the person have better quality of life. Okay, next. Attention deficit. So again, there, you know, it's kind of like the, oh, something else is happening. You know, you'll be talking to someone, all of a sudden they'll get up and they'll walk away, and you're like, what is happening here? We were having this really nice conversation, or they were, you know, they were enjoying what we were talking about, and all of a sudden they're gone on to something else. And so, you know, they have a difficulty shifting, you know, from, you know, let's say, you know, doing what they're doing now in a, you know, doing some kind of an activity or something, you know, peel the potatoes or something, and then having to transition into, you know, going for a walk or going outside. It's like they're, you know, so it can be inattention or difficulty. You know, it can be like what we call perseverating. It's like, you know, like I have to, but I have to, and getting quite upset. Next slide. Woo! We did it. All 8 days. So, so this is our just kind of an overview. And certainly, again, you know, we need to be mindful that what we talk about is that all behavior we're trying to communicate, and these 8 A's may give you a little bit of insight into why different behaviors are happening with the people who have dementia in your life. Okay, next slide. So we talked about this before. It's not a normal part of aging, and it's a really pretty slide. So we won't put it in. But yeah, so I think, you know, I think what's a good takeaway is also that this is very individual, and that our approach is hard to solve, but certainly to look at each person's history and life, and you know, doing the best we can to be what we call person-centered, which is really individualizing how we work with each person, family member, or client. Next slide. And now it's to you, Farzana. You can come on.
Thank you so much, Nellie. Thanks for that overview of dementia. So I will speak briefly about caring for persons with dementia and some of the challenges that families may encounter in caring for them. So I think one of the most important ones is, first of all, recognizing dementia, right? Very often people are either not sure if it is dementia or misrecognize dementia, as the doctor was telling us earlier, when there is no dementia, or are simply not willing to even go in for a diagnosis, right? Because they don't know what to do with it. It is scary. They don't necessarily understand that this could be not a normal part of aging and is actually something else. So seeking a diagnosis and the barriers related to that. So, you know, there may be many reasons for which people don't seek a diagnosis of dementia. The first and most probably prevalent idea is that, you know, cognitive impairment is a natural part of aging, which is a myth. It is not to the extent as it is encountered in dementia. And so people just don't know about dementia don't know that there is any kind of advantage to going and seeking a diagnosis of dementia. There may also be a lot of wrong ideas about what is causing the person's behavior. So, for example, attributing changes in behavior to psychological or cultural or religious reasons, right? So there may be lots of reasons for which people think they're seeing a change in behavior, but don't attribute it to dementia. There may also be barriers related to stigma. For many people, it's embarrassing that, a mother or father is exhibiting these signs that they never did before, right? Or it could be embarrassing to seek a diagnosis of dementia because then you're acknowledging that there is something wrong with the person. This can be very troublesome, and stigma associated with seeking a diagnosis is really a barrier. Another barrier is lack of facilities or lack of supports, right? So, for example, we were just talking before this webinar, and Dr. Aswathi was telling me that she knows of very few places in India that actually have supports for people with dementia. So again, who is going to, even if you get a diagnosis of dementia, what are you going to do with that diagnosis, right? Is there any kind of support available for people with dementia? That's an important barrier. Also, cultural expectations of family. We have in Canada, we have many immigrant families, people who come from countries like India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and many parts of the world. And in many communities, there is stigma against, maybe seeking help, right? Because culturally it's expected that children look after older people or children look after their parents. But sometimes, this kind of looking after becomes really difficult, especially in the late stages of dementia when the person requires 24/7 care. It becomes extremely challenging. Similarly, in families in India, it is very difficult to manage with person with dementia in the advanced stages at home if both partners are working or children are in school, etc. So how do you balance this cultural expectation of looking after older adults with the challenges of looking after persons with dementia at a later stage? Another challenge is around slowing down the progression of dementia. So as Nellie said, dementia cannot be cured, but definitely at some stage, you can slow down the progression, right? But people don't always know that. There are lots of things that can be done. Exercise has been shown to be very useful in slowing down the progression. Proper nutrition, education, keeping your brain engaged. But people, again, don't know about these kinds of things that can be done to slow down the progression of dementia, and that is a challenge. Family members struggle with how to deal with challenging behaviors, right? So, a person who has had 2 baths a day suddenly refuses to have a bath at all, right, for 2-3 days. And this can be very challenging. A person has had a meal and then insists that they've not eaten and wants to eat another meal. This can be challenging. A person throws things in the room, gets a little aggressive, when they're angry. And this can be extremely challenging to handle. So this kind of challenging behavior, handling or dealing with this kind of challenging behavior in the home can be very difficult. We talked a little bit about caring for persons with advanced dementia. Persons with advanced dementia may require their food to be mushed up, for example. They may not be able to swallow, right? They may not be able to speak. They may not be able to communicate. They will not be able to move. And so caring for such persons in the home can become very difficult. And finally is caregiver burden and self-care. Someone has to look after persons with dementia at a later stage or advanced stage, and there is a real likelihood of that person being burnt out, right? So for example, I have family members where both the partners are, both the husband and wife are in their 80s, and now the 85-year-old, 87-year-old older adult is looking after his wife who has got dementia, who is now 83. It becomes extremely difficult to deal with these challenging behaviors and also to kind of carry this burden of caregiving, right? Then the person has to also take care of their own mental health, and it becomes difficult when they have to focus all their energy on caring for a person with dementia. So Nellie and I both work in, a college in Canada, in Ontario, and we work in the gerontology program where our students work closely with persons in the community and also with many diverse communities. So my background is, I'm an immigrant from India, and I am extremely interested in issues related to immigrant older adults. And one of the things that Nellie and I both noticed was, when our students work in the field or in different places, there really is no culturally relevant and linguistically appropriate resources for educating people about dementia. There's a lot of information on dementia. It is largely in English. There is also a lot of information on how to care for people with dementia, but it is not necessarily catered to different cultural communities, right? And also the language used is typically quite difficult for the layperson to understand. Right. So you saw the 8 A's of dementia. That's the kind of information you would typically get also in, booklets or information booklets. And that can be difficult for people who don't have a high level of education or don't have English language to competencies to understand that information. So while talking about this, we felt that there was a real need for culturally relevant and linguistically appropriate resources for the South Asian community. By South Asian, I mean people who live in Canada from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan. And we have a large population of the South Asian community in Canada. And people come here with, exactly the same kind of thinking and experiences as they would in their countries of origin. So very little awareness about dementia, very little understanding about how to care for people with dementia. So we thought of this idea of creating some kind of educational material which would be culturally relevant as well as linguistically appropriate. And we thought of doing this in collaboration with one of our organizations in the community, which is called the Alzheimer's Society of Peel. What we did was we hired 2 of our students from our gerontology program, both of whom are international students from Punjab. And, these students had their own experiences of family members who had dementia, as well as in the school with our classes, they had learned a lot about dementia. And we asked the students to create scenarios which family members are likely to encounter in dealing with persons with dementia. So, for example, they came up with 8 scenarios. One scenario could be maybe, a daughter-in-law is telling a mother-in-law to go for a bath, and the mother-in-law is saying, no, I don't want to go for a bath. And then the daughter-in-law gets angry with the mother-in-law. And that's a very typical scenario that plays out in many families. So we had 8 such scenarios. And for each scenario, first we introduced, the students created the scenarios. They created a scenario where the interaction was not ideal, right? So something was going wrong in the interaction. The caregiver was getting frustrated or angry, or the interaction was deteriorating. And then they would they would introduce a narrator who would tell us why this was not handled well. And then the narrator would tell us how to handle the situation. And then they would come up with an alternate scenario, which was a much better way to handle the behavior. And the narrator would come in again and tell us why that was ideal. So the students came up with these 8 scenarios. Nellie and I vetted the scenarios based on our own experiences. Our collaborators at the Alzheimer's Society of Peel vetted these scenarios and provided input and feedback into the scenarios. Then we took the scenarios to different community members in the community to kind of tell us whether they felt that this was appropriate and whether the language that we had used was simple enough to understand and commonplace. And these scenarios were initially created in Hindi text, because the idea was that we hope to find funding to create YouTube videos that would help. We could actually enact these scenarios and distribute it freely. So students and community volunteers really played a huge role in creating this Hindi language toolkit. So the Hindi language toolkit has been published on Source, which is Sheridan College's institutional repository. The link is available in the slides, and I'm happy to share it with you. It is 8 scenarios that family members will encounter while caring for people with dementia. The scenarios include interactions related to common behaviors, such as, the person has trouble sleeping. or the person is showing aggression, or the person is refusing to take a bath, right? Or the person is living in the past. Nellie talked about living in the past, and also gives information on how to deal with these scenarios. So this Hindi language toolkit is available in textual form right now. Since our students came from Punjab and were conversant in conversational Punjabi, they then converted the Hindi language toolkit into Punjabi. But instead of having a textual format, we, as a group together, we involved a lot of community members to enact this in audio recordings. And this audio recorded Punjabi language toolkit is also available on Source, freely available as an educational resource. As a next step, we have received a very small pot of funding to create such a similar audio recording in Hindi. And potentially, we are also exploring the possibility of gamifying this toolkit into some kind of an application for mobile users, freely available for them. We are always looking for other languages. So if you are interested in volunteering and converting this into Malayalam, please let us know. We have no funds for that, but we would be very grateful for any kind of such contributions. To end with, I think we just like to talk about, that though dementia may not have a cure, there is a lot that can be done in terms of prevention, right? And also the need to look at dementia not as a problem of an individual or individual family, but a national public or international public health-based prevention, right? To focus on that. So at the primary level, there is a lot that can be done to even prevent the onset of dementia. Healthy living, exercising, keeping your brain active, being socially connected have all been known to, have good outcomes in terms of preventing dementia, preventing the onset of dementia. At the secondary level, a lot needs to be done in terms of, identifying and screening, early identification and treatment, wherever to keep things at a plateau, right? So to keep things as long as possible from deteriorating further. Hopefully, in a few years there will be a cure for dementia and Alzheimer's, and let's try to keep this at bay as long as possible. Tertiary interventions include psychosocial and rehabilitation needs of the person with dementia and their caregivers. And really, there is such little in countries like India in terms of this kind of rehabilitation. I know because I have family members in India who have experienced dementia, and we have struggled hard to find these kinds of interventions. So there really is a need to focus on prevention in both the primary, secondary, and the tertiary levels. So that's about it for now. Thank you for listening. I'm going to try to shut this and get back here. Have I stopped sharing? Okay, and I apologize for my dog snoring. I could not find the mic button to mute her all this time, but I think I will do that now and open it up for any questions or comments. Thank you.
Ma'am. Okay. Wonderful presentation, ma'am. They are having certain questions.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Nellie and Dr. Farzana, for the wonderful insights you've given. I would like to ask a question. That is, Dr. Farzana was talking about a secondary level treatment. Is medication available for dementia, ma'am?
Yes, there is. There is some medication. Again, it doesn't stop the person from having dementia, but as Farzana said, it can keep the person at a plateau so that the progression isn't happening as quickly. Eventually, it will happen, regardless of what medication they're on, but there are a few different medications that are available. Yeah, that's a great question.
Actually, she is Dr. Seema Gopinathan, Faculty, Department of Home Science, Associate Professor.
I see some questions in the chat too. So one question, Nellie, I'll let you answer these. Is dementia completely reversible, however bad the condition is?
As far as I know, maybe the doctor can tell me otherwise, but as far as I know, it's not reversible. But again, as Farzana discussed, you know, trying to do things to continue to be active and engaged and socially, like seeing people can really help. And one of the things that we talked about in our discussions while we were developing the Hindi toolkit is really about the whole family, right? So it's not just, you know, their wife or husband or daughter-in-law or daughter, but it can be the whole family that can help. So even the young people, you know, the grandchildren can, you know, help with keeping them engaged. So yeah, so I mean, I think the most important thing is to you know, stay connected and you know, try to kind of understand them from where they're at, as opposed to putting our expectations on them. Just really trying to understand where they're coming from and join them in supporting them. Yeah, I hope that answers that.
Thank you, ma'am.
There's another question. Is there any possibility that a person can have memory loss but no dementia?
Yeah, I have it every day. There's things that I forget. I'm constantly losing my keys in my phone, and I keep telling my children, listen, I'm forgetting this now, so don't think that I have dementia just because I can't find my keys and phone. So absolutely, yeah. And so that's the important piece, is that we don't want to make assumptions. It's really, you know, yeah, so it doesn't mean just because they're forgetting to eat their lunch that they have dementia. It may be that they're really engaged in what they're reading. So, yeah.
So we have a technical question here. Several neurological issues have overlapping symptoms, and depression is one of them. What are the other neurological issues which have depression as its initial symptom?
Boy, I don't know. I'm sorry, but that's a little bit above my understanding. I mean, I'm not a dementia specialist. Certainly, I think if we had someone from the Alzheimer's Society who's studied everything, you know, my background is social work, so I look more at how to work with people as opposed to, I'm afraid all of that is, I don't know. So I don't know if the doctor's still here, if he's able to speak to that. I don't know that answer.
Yeah, so I agree. Even I don't know. I mean, this is not, we are not medical doctors, right? And the question is more rooted in the anatomy than we are more focused on the social aspects of dementia and how it impacts family members. So sorry, we cannot answer that question. How do we differentiate between the initial stages of dementia and forgetfulness due to old age? One participant asks, I am already having forgetfulness and feel a bit scary.
Do you want to answer that, Farzana, or do you want me to?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, as I said, I think, you know, you don't, I absolutely, I think everyone as they age, you know, I'm aging too, you know, it's a worry, but it's, I guess what I would encourage is that, you know, is just to keep doing things, you know, like it's normal. It's a normal thing that, you know, if you're stressed, if you have a lot of different kinds of responsibilities, if, you know, if you've been forgetful your whole life, you know, like, so I think it's a little bit about your baseline. If you're seeing some dramatic changes, and this is not normal for you, you know, it may be worth, you know, going to speak to your doctor. But I would try as much as possible. It's easy to say than to do, to not necessarily self-diagnose and say, oh, I must have dementia. So my thought would be to speak to a doctor, and that might be the reassurance you need. And if it is something that needs to be attended to, then you know, taking those steps to support your health. Yeah.
Thank you, Nellie. And I'd just like to add to that, our lives are so busy nowadays. There are so many commitments. It's almost impossible to remember, right? If I don't have my calendar telling me what to do next, I would not know what to do that day at all, because this is too much to remember. So not getting worried about, forgetfulness, because we really can't remember everything. But again, as Nellie said, if it is unusual, or if it is interfering with your, in unusual ways, right? It's not at all normal, the kind of forgetfulness, maybe that's something you want to look at. So another question, Nellie, for us is, can we reverse or slow down the dementia using natural methods, including diets and medication?
Yeah, so there's certainly
meditation. Sorry, not medication. Meditation.
Oh, meditation. Oh, love meditation. Yeah. So, I don't know. Was the question if it was reversible?
Reverse or slow down?
Slow down. I would say anything that keeps you active. So whether it's meditation, prayer, community events, anything that can keep you, and I think, yeah, mindfulness is a helpful practice, right? Being, staying present. And it can be that spiritual part of self. So one of the things that we do look at is really a holistic approach. So it's not just the physical, but it's the mental, the psychological, the spiritual parts of self. So, engaging in all of those things can be helpful. One thing that's kind of a myth here in Canada, I don't know if it's a myth in India, is that people are like, oh, I have to do a crossword puzzle. That's how I'm going to stay well. Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, learning an instrument or, learning a language, like things that are really, if you've been doing puzzles your whole life, or you've been knitting or crocheting, that's Farzana, your whole life, that's not necessarily going to be stimulating parts of your brain that is going to increase neuroplasticity and so on. But if you're doing something that's challenging for you, that will be, right?
And again, just to add to what Nellie just said, I think that you can definitely slow down dementia, but it is not, to the best of our knowledge, reversible, right, as yet.
Good evening, ma'am. I have two doubts. One is, does heredity play a role in dementia? Does it run in the family?
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's not, it can be hereditary, but it's not like a direct relationship. If your dad has dementia, you're getting dementia. It's not like that. So I think it should be kept on your radar, like that you think about it, not worry, but that if you're starting to see a number of signs, that maybe you connect with your doctor. Yeah. But it's not that if you have someone in your family that for sure you're going to get it. No.
Now my second question is there a relationship between using coconut oil and delaying this onset of dementia? Or will it help in improving the condition?
Wow, I don't know that, although coconut oil is very yummy. I'm not sure about that. I mean, back in the day when I was taking gerontology, it was all about fluoride. It was about fluoride in the water and so on, that was what was causing it, right? So, like there's lots of information that comes and goes. I say if you like coconut oil, use it, but I don't know that it's going to necessarily change, what's going to happen in that way. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
May I ask you one more question? Since you both have been working in this particular field for some considerable amount of time, may I ask you that if gender has a role to play in the onset of dementia, like have you seen more patients belonging to male gender or female?
Yeah, that's a really important question. As far as I know, it's not gender-based, but what we do know is women live longer. So, the fact that they live longer, their likelihood increases with advanced age. So as men die, somewhat younger than women, that increases women's likelihood because they're just living longer, right? So I think that that's the relationship. I haven't read or heard anything to say otherwise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, ma'am. Can I ask some mistake? Yoga and music therapy can reduce dementia.
Yoga and music?
Music therapy.
Music therapy.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, all of those things, again, it's about staying engaged. I mean, we know that it's really interesting, actually. My class, I do a class that's all about teaching around, using art and music and all kinds of things to work with older adults. And there's been a number of studies that have used music, like I think they were called iPods at the time, but basically just music that older adults were listening to, and that they would put in their headphones, and older adults who have advanced dementia who hadn't been moving or speaking, all of a sudden were like dancing, like in their seats, and they were, perhaps even, some of them who weren't verbal were verbal while they were listening to music. So I think there's a huge power in music therapy for sure. Yeah.
I think music therapy mostly in terms of keeping persons with dementia occupied, keeping them happy, keeping them, maybe encouraging them to move a little bit more. But I don't think music therapy in terms of preventing, in terms of stopping someone, from getting dementia. I don't think that's, but of course, engaging in learning an instrument has been known to be very beneficial. So again, to add to what Nellie said, anything that involves your body being fit and active, anything that involves your brain being fit and active, which would mean learning an instrument, learning a new language, learning dancing. I attended a talk once and they said learning dancing at an older age is very good to kind of prevent dementia. So anything that involves your brain learning new things and challenging would be helpful.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
And is there any relationship between this pandemic and the increase of dementia patients? Because during the initial stages of pandemic, majority of the older people were inside their home and they were not able to communicate with people. So is there any relationship there? Because I mentioned about my uncle. So he was actually confined to 4 walls and not able to see his relatives. So is there any relationship between this pandemic and dementia?
It wouldn't necessarily cause dementia, but it definitely, we know, because we've had a number of studies while people were in lockdown in long-term care facilities, that with the lack of interaction and engagement with humans, that has a negative impact, certainly, and progression of the disease. So that's why, we are always trying to find ways to be engaging and, keep people connected who have dementia, because, it's definitely going to, their cognition is going to decrease with the lack of engagement. So absolutely, we saw that in Canada a lot. Yeah. Again, it's not causal, but it had a huge negative impact. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes, Sree.
Ma'am, one more doubt. Does our lifestyle play a role in getting this condition?
Do you want to speak to that, Farzana?
Yeah, totally. So as we said that, keeping dementia at bay, there is a lot that can be done to prevent the onset of dementia. So physical activity has been known to prevent the onset of dementia. So the more physically active you are, the better it is to prevent. Diet, for sure, right? So again, diet impacts your health. So, keeping your mind and body nourished properly is a good thing to prevent the onset of dementia. Lifestyle also involves your social interactions with people. So being more socially connected is likely to delay the onset a little bit. It's better for you to be connected. Lifestyle also involves your, what you do with your time. So being, again, engaging your mind in activities is likely to prevent the onset of dementia. So definitely lifestyle impacts, delaying the onset of dementia.
There's one other thing I'd want to add, and Farzana, thank you. That was perfect. But it's if someone has a urinary tract infection, something like that, and they get what's called a delirium, so a high fever, and that can actually cause a kind of dementia, and if it's not treated, that dementia, like if they're treated, so let's say they go to the hospital or a doctor and they get the urinary tract infection treated, then they go back to normal. So if you see a sudden huge change and someone's been sick, definitely make sure that you seek medical attention, because it's considered a medical emergency at that point. And if they're treated, then they can go back to their normal. If it's not treated, people have kind of stayed there, and then their progression happens, right? So it's those kinds of things are really important to make sure that it gets addressed quickly.
Thank you, ma'am. There is one more question in the chat box. Is there a link between stress and dementia?
Not that I know of. I have not heard of studies that correlate stress with dementia, but I could be wrong. Nellie, have you heard of that?
I have not, but I definitely know from lived experience and working with a lot of people is that certainly stress can cause you to look like there's some signs of dementia, right? So if you're really under a lot of stress, you're going to have difficulty concentrating, that kind of thing. So. Thanks, Sheen.
Any more questions?
Well, thank you so much for listening to us and for all your very interesting questions. Hope this was informative, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So let me invite Ms. Seema Gopinathan, Assistant Professor, Department of Home Science, Sheridan College for Women, to propose the vote of thanks. Seema, ma'am.
A warm good evening to all. I'm sure all of you would agree with me that it was indeed a very eye-opening and insightful talk we heard on dementia. Some of the aspects of it, both our resource persons touched upon, were very distressing, so to say, and I'm sure it would have made all the participants realize how blessed we are for being in perfect health. And it's also a reminder to keep praying for remaining intact. Now, coming to my duty of proposing the vote of thanks, I would like to place on record our sincere thanks to our manager, Sree Nadeshan, Dr. Jaydev and Treasurer SN Trust, and our principal, Dr. R. Sunil Kumar, for their unstinting support they extend to us in all our endeavors. Dr. S. Shekharan, our IQAC coordinator, has also been a constant companion in all the events we organize. And let me take this opportunity to express our sincere thanks to you too, sir. The resource persons of today's webinar, Dr. Farzana Chaze, Professor of Applied Health and Community Studies, Sheridan College, Ontario, and Dr. Nellie Groenenberg, Coordinator and Professor of Applied Health and Community Studies, Sheridan College, Ontario, have done a wonderful job of explaining in detail on the caring for persons with dementia. It was indeed an eye-opener for people like us who had thought it to be just a condition of forgetfulness. We are immensely thankful to you, professors, for sharing your valuable time in enlightening us on this impairing condition called dementia. And also for the care that needs to be extended to those affected. On my personal behalf and on behalf of the entire Department of Home Science, I extend to you both a very sincere thanks for sharing your boundless knowledge and thoughts on this subject. My honest appreciation to all my dear students for their earnest participation in the webinar. Thank you so much. And last but not the least, I wholeheartedly thank Dr. Aparna Das, Assistant Professor of Economics, who is also the coordinator of this webinar series, ECLECTICS 2022, and all my colleagues of our department and other faculty members of Sree Narayana College for Women, Kollam, for your sincere participation in this webinar. Thank you again, one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Ma'am.
Thank you. മിസ്സേ ഈ ഫീഡ്ബാക്ക് ഫോം കുട്ടികളെല്ലാം കണ്ടു കാണുമായിരിക്കുമല്ലോ അല്ലേ?
അറിയില്ലടാ, നോക്കാം.
മിസ്സേ നന്നായിരുന്നു കേട്ടോ, അപർണയാണേ, നന്നായിരുന്നു.
താങ്ക് യു ഡിയർ.
Thank you, miss.
അപർണ റെക്കോർഡിംഗ് സ്റ്റോപ്പ് ചെയ്യട്ടാ.
സ്റ്റോപ്പ് ചെയ്യും മിസ്സേ, സ്റ്റോപ്പ് ചെയ്തില്ലെങ്കിലേ നിങ്ങൾ എല്ലാരും ഔട്ട് ആവുന്ന